Hi, my name is Matt Perez, and I'm here at the Art Hatchery Life with Peter Green. And Jose's not here today because he had a medical thing. And I think we can manage. So why don't we start with you telling us what you're about and how this management thinking about and start with that.
Great. Yeah. So I'm the co-founder of a company called Humanizing Work. And I think a big part of what we're about is described in that name. I think that a lot of us, in fact, probably most of us these days, don't experience work as a place where we feel significance, where we feel energized. Instead, it's the opposite for too many people. That we go to work, we feel like we're a cog in a machine. We don't feel like we're treated with any kind of respect. And that, I think, is a big human tragedy of our day, that work should be a place where we go and do meaningful things in service of other people with other people. And so the Humanizing Work company we founded to try to make a dent in that in any way we can. Now, that's kind of a big picture version of it. The more detailed version of that is that both me and my co-founder, Richard, have a long background in Agile software development. And so what we experienced in the early days of Agile teams was a real switch from, again, work feeling kind of dehumanized, like we were just, knocking out requirements and doing what we were told, to now we felt a lot more empowerment. Like we were doing little small slices of work and seeing how those actually benefited customers, and we had some autonomy in how we did that. And so in the early days of Agile, we really felt like that made a difference for those teams. And we had a good experience with that. And so our teams were pretty successful at it within our companies. I was part of Adobe. Richard was a consultant that was doing work with a lot of companies, but big tech giants, Microsoft, other companies. And so our success caused other teams at our companies to say, hey, what are they up to? Because they're not working crazy overtime to get this thing out the door. And their quality seems to be pretty high, and they seem to be really responsive to their customers. And so we started helping other teams in our companies learn how to do this Agile stuff. And we found that at the team level, we could create that environment pretty reliably as long as we had enough permission from the organization around it. And I think both of us were lucky that we happened to have good management around us that was open to us trying things and trying to make work better. And then as we started helping more and more teams do this, we realized not every team is that lucky. And so I think what we're about now is, how do we make it less a result of luck and more just the way work gets done now? Is that we should be doing this, both because we get better business results, but I think more importantly, it's the right thing to do for people and for our communities and for the society at large.
Yeah. And if you thought about why you would work at all, why do we go and work for a salary or a wage, or have you thought about that?
Yeah, I think there's probably a Maslow's hierarchy involved there, that at a base level, we need enough to, eat, to live. At least in Western cultures, most people are fortunate enough that there's enough abundance in the world that we can at least feed ourselves. It gets harder when the economy's worse. Beyond that, though, why do we work? Well, we work because we want to get better at things. If you go back to the self-determination theory, right, that's described by Dan Pink, what engages us at work? What do we like about it? Well, we want to do something that helps somebody else. We want to have a sense of competence at what we do and growth. And we want to do things with other people. So I think there's a social aspect. Both we want to be in connection with other people doing things. That's fun. We're social creatures. And we want to do that in service of other people. And we want to just grow over time. And that's what work can offer if the systems around it are set up to do that.
And you talked about permission, not having permission. because I had a similar idea when I first started getting into Agile, and I thought the whole organization should be Agile, not just
Yeah.
a little piece, right?
Right.
And you mentioned a couple of times the early days of Agile.
Yeah.
So what happened in the latter days of life?
Yeah. We've almost kind of distanced ourselves a little bit from the Agile brand, because what's happened is it's just become another dehumanized technology that some executive brings in. Like, we'll literally get calls sometimes from potential clients, and they say, can you install Agile on my teams? As if it's some technology that'll just make them faster. It's a whip by another name.
Yeah.
Right. And so we disqualify those clients very quickly, because that's not how we experienced Agile. Certainly is not going to give the company the benefits they're expecting out of it. And it's not going to give the human benefit if we're just thinking of it as a way to make people go faster. Give me more, right? So that's what I mean by the early days of Agile. It felt a little bit different back then. Whereas now there's a whole industry that's, trying to use it in a fiat sense, right? It's Agile by fiat instead of Agile by choice.
Yeah. And SAFe has made it even worse.
Yeah, that's been our
SAFe is
experience.
now the Agile that's not Agile for big companies to say that they're Agile.
Yeah, right.
So I liked your phrase. You said a whip by another name. I like that. And yeah, well, we thought beyond the ownership management model is beyond the work model. Work is where you go and you do your thing, and they give you money and stuff like that. And you buy food and you buy clothes and you buy the plants in the back or whatever, those green things are in the back and stuff like that. Which is all part of who we are. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
But in the end, he says, my speaker too loud, lower the volume. No. Let's. Okay, I'll try to lower the volume. Works. And so what? I was a co-founder of a company in 2007, and we started with co-management from day one.
Mm-hmm.
And I was we were all a big proponents of Agile back then, because we thought it was, a cat's meow to
Yeah.
myself. And but like you said, it's become a let's have a daily to have a report of
Right.
people telling us what they did and what they didn't do and stuff like that. And it's become very, very worked. So I agree with you on that. So what kind of things do you do for a company that actually wants to do Agile?
Yeah. Like I said, we know how to make it work at the team level.
Okay.
We've done that 100 times. And what they need around that is they need the conditions in order to be a co-managed team, a self-organizing team. And I remember in the very early days at Adobe when I was helping other teams, there was, I think the first other team that I helped, my team made audio products. We made Adobe Audition. So we were part of the audio and video group at Adobe. And one of the first teams that I helped after we kind of figured out how to make it work at Adobe was After Effects. After Effects does motion graphics.
Yeah.
That was a great team, full of really smart, passionate people, loved the artistic side of it. And I remember doing some training for them, just teaching them how Scrum worked. And one of the managers, an engineering manager on that team, Chris, was just this really smart, big heart. And he pulled me aside and he said, I totally see how this is going to work well for the team. This is going to be great. I don't know what my job is anymore. If my job title is engineering manager, what do I do? And I thought, well, this must have been something that the Agile community has tackled. So I started kind of, looking for blog posts or videos, and this would have been around 2008, right? So there wasn't a lot written, and all the advice seemed really either fuzzy or incomplete or just, I think, wrong in a lot of context. So,
A lot of bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah. And, oh, just be a servant leader now. Okay. What does that mean? Oh, your job is to remove impediments. Okay. Well, that seems very incomplete. Or like there are lots of, I remember reading the Gary Hamel article, First Fire All the Managers, where he describes Morningstar, the tomato processing, right?
Right.
Which is a total clickbait title because there have never been managers there. They never fired a manager. They just never hired one.
Yeah.
They hired the colleague letter of understanding to do management for them, right?
Right.
So I thought none of that advice is useful to Chris, this engineering manager. He's not going to fire himself. That would be a bad move for him. He already has the heart of a servant leader, and removing impediments is not a job. It's not a full-time job. It's part of a job. And so we started looking for examples of companies that did management well, that created the conditions for real self-management, co-management within the team.
Mm-hmm.
And the first example that I got really excited about was David Marquet, the sub commander, right? He wrote that book, Turn the Ship Around,
right?
Where he had this big crisis moment early days when he was the captain of that submarine and realized, I can't give another command. And he said, I vow to not give another command on this submarine other than the command to launch a missile or a weapon. I don't want that on anybody's conscience. But other than that, I'm not going to give a command. I'm going to ask people to come to me and say, I intend to do this. I've done the following due diligence to make sure it's safe, that I'm doing it the right way, and it's aligned with our mission because. And I remember thinking that's perfectly aligned with like the Dan Pink summary of things. Autonomy, mastery, purpose. That's what people want, right? So autonomy, I intend to. That's a statement of autonomy.
Right.
I've done the following. That's either a demonstration of competence that I can do it, or a chance for Marquet or whoever the quote unquote boss in that structure is to say, oh, well, did you think of these other things? So it's either competence or growth. I'm either going to learn how to do it, or I already know how to do it. And then third, the mission. It's aligned with our purpose. And I thought that's great. And so we started teaching that to managers. But in big corporations, there's not the structure for people to come and say, I intend to do this or we intend to do that. And so what that evolved into is what we need is clarity. And in a traditional organization, that clarity often comes from the top. But even self-organizing teams, they need to know what should we point ourselves at. Mm-hmm. So that could be co-created or that could be inherited, right? Right? But they need clarity to feel like, all right, I mean, we were part of a big organization. We were told, hey, you need to work on this audio product and attract more video customers. All right. Within that mandate, we have a pretty big sense of autonomy within that. And that was sufficient for us. So they need clarity. They need to increase capability over time. And they need systems that work. Marquet doesn't mention this, but he changed the system of work radically when he said the decision-making process we're going to use is now completely different. This used to be how we make decisions on the ship. This is the new way we're going to make decisions on the ship.
He talks about it in his talks and in person and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. And so those were the three things. And we thought, okay, maybe that's what we should tell Chris, this engineering manager. What do I do now? Well, you help create clarity, you help improve the system, and you help increase capability. And so we started testing that with organizations we were working with and found that even in more traditional fiat structures, that started to create space for teams to feel like, all right, I'm doing good work that's meaningful to me. And so I love what you talk about in your book of co-ownership and how that makes a radical difference for people in co-management. And I look forward to the day when that's the predominant model, economic model. Until then, we feel like let's chip away and create more meaningful work for more people until we can get there.
Yeah, it's not going to be a big whack. It's going to be, little by little.
Yeah, we've got 150 years of habits and mythology to overcome, right?
Well, we have more than that.
More than that, but at least the current way we think of managing a business, right?
Yeah, since the trains. And
Right.
but the whole thing of competition and dominance and all that stuff starts
This way older, right?
way back.
Yeah.
I was listening to a documentary yesterday about a new homo flavor of helmet, and they bury their dead and they handle fire and stuff like that. And but they have a brain. They had a brain like the size of an orange.
Mm-hmm.
They have a very small brain, and you think about it. Okay, so they had rituals and they had burying and they had burials and stuff like that. Uh, the seed was planted back there. And that's 250 million years before humankind.
Right.
So, so yeah, it goes way back. And I don't doubt that at one point it might have been good. It might have been the thing to do. But now we have too many educated people and people that ask the question of, what do I do? Do I keep whacking people over the head or and stuff like that? And even people on the top saying, we want you to feel like an owner. We want you to act like an owner. Well, make me an owner.
Yeah.
It's that simple, right?
Right.
And we'll eventually we'll get there by hook or by crook. It's not going to be a straight line. It's going to be like this.
Yeah.
And but we're going to get there. There's so many educated people. The same way that we're chipping away at women as chattel and people with brown skin or black skin being lesser and stuff like that. But I see wage-based system, a salary-based system, as another form of slavery. Right? I own your output and I put it in my pocket. And I give you some of it back so you can eat and buy the plants and all that stuff. But it's still slavery. And but like I said, we'll get to it. It's not like it's an impossible dream. It's that you and I may not see it, but it's going to happen. And doing what you're doing, I think, is chipping away at the problem.
Right.
We tried as to be an agile organization when we started. That lasted about 2 days, and because there's a lot of things going on in the business that it's not just agile. Agile is now the whole team is the cog, as opposed to an individual. It's the whole team is the cog. And when you take him out of that, the funny thing is people say, well, that's not my job. That's not what I do. Have you run into that?
Yes, for sure. And I think there's something about the Dunbar numbers related here, right? You're familiar with the sociologist Matt Dunbar, right? Like he did some research on group sizes, essentially. And he found that 5 people can really trust each other, know each other really well. About 15 to 30 people can have like an accountability agreement, right? We can debate and make decisions collectively. And then up to about 150 people can gossip about each other enough that there's like a social expectation. Beyond 150 people, you just don't know people well enough, right? This is why Gore has a max size of a business unit of 150. If a business unit starts to grow beyond that, they say, well, we need to split it into 2 business units because you just don't know each other well enough.
Right.
And so I think there's probably something around that where with a 5-person company, a little startup, everybody understands it's everybody's job. Everything's job.
Yes.
Up to about
Everybody's
15 or
different.
20, it's pretty close. We'll get a little specialization, but I know, hey, I'm the expert on this part of it, but if I need help, I can reach out to Matt and he'll help me.
Right.
Up to 150, there's going to be more specialization, but we can still communicate effectively and figure out how to make it work. Above 150, it just seems to all fall apart. And
Right.
so far we've just reverted to, well, okay, how do we make trains run, right? Like those old management tropes of how we manage things of that size, groups of that size. So yeah, I've definitely seen that, but I've seen it much more in very large organizations. I think the bigger the organization, the more likely somebody's going to say, well, that's not my job.
Yeah, we fired. We had a bunch of people. The company got to be 800 plus when I left, and a lot of people, their initial reaction was, "Not my job. I don't do that. I don't do that." And we didn't. We should have an intent or an impact of growing people to the point where they can run their own company.
Mm-hmm.
That would be one thing to have, and we didn't have that. So, but I saw some indication that you start with a 10 to 15 or whatever, 15 to 30 people team, a small team. Actually, we had smaller teams than that. It's like 8 and 10 was the typical number. And having be self-replicating. In other words, this team was split and start another team, and this team and start another team. But the whole thing is, you shouldn't need HR. You shouldn't need anything, any kind of meta function like that. And that worked. I saw it worked in a small scale. And I think they can work in a large scale, in a large company. The problem with the large company is that, like you said, we're social animals, right? We imitate each other in every respect. And if you have a company, you have 3 managers, I want to have 4 managers. And then the next guy wants to have 5 managers and 6. And of course, the first guy wants 3. I want 9, whatever. And so it becomes competition kind of a thing. So
yeah, the thing that we've seen in as companies grow, the thing that we've seen that has helped a little bit is you have those little pods, right? Like those little small teams that are doing the work. And then as soon as whatever problem that business is trying to solve can't be solved by a team that small,
right.
then you need another team, and then you need another team. And then at some point, those teams need a way to coordinate and communicate. And so what we've seen is that even though we call these kind of management teams, but create a team and say your job as a team is not to manage people. Your job as a team is to support those teams to make sure that they have clarity, not just of what that team is up to, but clarity of how you fit into the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Increase the capability for us to communicate effectively, improve the systems of coordination across those teams. And so the quote unquote management teams I've got 3 or 4, 100 to 200 person companies where this structure has seemed to work well. Those quote unquote management teams, if we say you have 3 jobs, your job is not to manage people. Your job is to create clarity, increase capability, and improve the system for the teams that you support. It's a little bit of the flipped pyramid idea, right? Where my job is to support you. And I think you're right that there's always going to be that tension that as soon as we call somebody a manager, now that's a status thing and people aspire to it, right? So that's still a tension in these organizations, but it does seem to be doing the job well. Of those teams feel empowered, they enjoy working there, they like to come into work, and I think it's like we said, it chips away at the human tragedy of everybody's working for the weekend. Like I just do my job so that I can enjoy my life when I'm not at work, instead of I go to work and I find meaning in the work itself, and it makes me a better person to do that work.
Yeah, we rather than, and it sounds like you read the book. Is that right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. And so rather than make all these rules and, a package that you buy and you put in the shelf somewhere, we went the other way. And that's why it's called radical.
Right.
It's not radical, I'm going to kill you. Radical is the root of whatever it is that you're dealing with. And we define a foundation. We said, if you're based around this foundation, a lot of things can go wrong, but a lot of things are going to go right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to help you go in the right direction. And what you said about belonging, wanting to belong to a group and stuff like that. And what we found is that the same idea of what you call the management team, that came out of people rather than me or my partner saying, well, you guys are going to do this. Is they would say, well, we need to get together on a regular basis, and then they tried, when it was smaller teams, they tried to everybody in the team. And some people were totally bored.
Yeah.
And some people like that. Some people like the communication and stuff like that, mostly women. And but they switch also. So today I went with my friend here, and tomorrow I didn't go. Somebody else went, and like that. So more fluid than just your job is, because once you get from the top, anything that your job is, that's your livelihood depends on that.
Yeah.
And so in the book we've gone towards the direction of, instead of capital as the force people, the things that forces people to do it one way or another, you have contributions.
Right.
We contribute, and we all contribute differently. This idea of one man, one vote is still idea, because some of us are interested in it. Some of us vote because habit or something like that, and most of us vote because we might get interested in a particular issue and stuff like that. But you contribute more or less you can contribute to that issue. You contribute to the whole process. You contribute to different things, and have that be the determinant of what your participation is. We haven't done it that way yet. We haven't. There isn't a company that can go to, oh, that company over there does it. By the way, I meant to ask you, when you say Adobe, were you here in the Valley or where are you at?
Well, I was at the time, so I was a part of a little startup I'm in Phoenix. So I was part of a little startup that made a product called Cool Edit Pro. Adobe acquired that company and we moved up to Seattle. So we were working in Seattle, but I was down in San Jose quite a bit. Once I was doing more agile transformation stuff, which was 2008 to 2015, I was in San Jose all the time. And then have moved back now. So I'm in the very hot climes of Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah, our biggest office or whatever, when we had an office, was in Hermosillo, which is just south of you. It's about 5 hours away from you.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm Cuban, born and raised, and I don't know if it's that or what the heck it is, but the heat never bothered me.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me either.
You go, and in that part of the world, you go to the shade, and you're okay.
Yeah.
Not in Merida, in Cuba, where I'm from, and Miami and stuff like that, where anywhere you go, you bring that heat with you.
Yeah, so it's interesting to hear you describe the different model, right? That where it's about contribution and I think, like, where's my energy? If I have energy around contributing around those things, the thing that we've tried to do with this model for management is make it about managing the work, not about managing people. And so you could use this model to look at and evaluate how do we create clarity using a radical model. So how do we create clarity for teams and across teams? And how do we increase capability over time? And what systems do we need to improve in order to do that? And you could totally use a volunteer contribution model and still look at that. We've used it kind of as a dashboard, like a management dashboard. How are we doing on clarity? The other part of it is that there's really an objective lens and a human lens to each of those three jobs, right? Objectively, strategically, what are we prioritizing? From a human side, why does the work matter? On an increased capability side, do we have the technical skills we need in order to get the job done? From a human side, are we creating psychological safety? Are we communicating effectively? Do I have a better and better sense of who I am as a person in this organization and how I make a contribution? Same thing on the system side. There are basic workflows and structures and things, but on the human side, how do we make decisions? How do we share power and empower each other, right? A lot of times people think I empower you. Well, we need to empower each other, right? And we do that through conversation and agreeing on how we'll decide. So I think the model is still really useful, whether if you're in a kind of traditional hierarchical fiat structure, useful there to start to chip away at it. If we're in a radical company, useful there to say, well, we need to do all of these things. And so if we're going to take a radical approach to it, then how are we doing these things in our organization?
Yeah, no, I think you're in the right path. There's no question that you're in the right path in my mind. And the whole idea is that we'll chip at it. And the thing about the lenses, my partner who's not here, Jose Leal, is very big on lenses, how you see things. And we actually have a prop. And I got to take my glasses off. And the prop is these lenses, which, this is the fiat world, right? We all walk around with these glasses on. And what you're trying to do is lift the shade so you can see clearly and go, holy shit, it looks clear now. And actually, I've taken this out in the street and people go, they don't say anything, but they just look at me. One guy said the other day, cool glasses. And I thought, I'm going to walk around with an extra pair to give to people. But it's that kind of a thing. Is we like stories. We love. Human beings are based on stories, and that story is the lens, and it distorts everything.
Yeah.
And now with the country being so polarized, it's even easier to see how we can both look at the same thing. And this guy see travesty or whatever, and I see, oh, that's good. But no, it's that lens that you have in front of you that distorts everything. And we can never be sure that it's the right destruction. There's no right destruction. But I like the idea of empowering each other. It's more like giving permission. You mentioned permission before. It's more like giving permission to each other to speak up.
That's how you balance autonomy, right? Because autonomy doesn't mean I have complete independence and I don't need to have any consequences for my behavior.
No,
it's I accept accountability to do this thing, and that means I expect you to hold me accountable for it. But are you okay if I take accountability to do this thing?
Right.
Yeah.
And people don't know how to ask, and I'm speaking for myself. You don't know how to ask without being manipulative or something. And they don't know how to accept permission. And a lot of times they just don't. You give them permission. Okay, it's okay to do that. It's like, well, shouldn't we ask your partner in the previous company? And Shouldn't we ask him, or shouldn't we ask God, or shouldn't we ask some higher power? You're being too easy, and that's we have thousands of years of training ourselves how to be compliant, and it's not going to disappear in a day. No, it's not. So how are we doing on time? Let's see. Oh, we're a little bit past time, but it doesn't matter. It's been really. Is there anything else you'd like to close up with, or?
Yeah, I think the only other idea that's been kind of germinating as we've talked is you alluded to it a little bit with balancing perspectives.
Yeah.
And I think in the Leal movement, the Teal movement, there's a little bit of capitalists are evil. Like there's that story we tell. Well, you're evil, you're greedy, and from the other side of it, like employees are lazy, they don't take ownership. And I think what would be useful, more useful than just identifying a new tribe and associating with that tribe and pointing the finger at the other people to say they're the bad ones. I think the thing that would be more useful is to say, what incentives are the venture-backed CEOs responding to, and how can we treat them with compassion? How can we treat the middle manager at the big corporation with compassion to understand they're not a bad person inherently? They're responding to a whole system of incentives. And then how do we help them chip away? Like we said, how do we help them chip away at slowly changing the system incentives to allow this type of work to happen?
Yeah.
And really thinking of it as just balancing perspectives.
That's very good. And actually, I've become less judgmental as I go through this, because really the question to any outburst or anything negative coming out of a person is, what's bothering you?
Yeah.
It's not me. It's what's bothering you. There's no good people or bad people. It's just, like you said, they're responding to what they learn and the incentives that keep it going.
Yeah.
So so by all means is we need to teach people how to teach people the alternative and have them choose. And I think most people will.
Yeah, which we do with stories, right? We learn by stories. If you want to teach, tell good stories, right? And we just have thousands of years of stories of heroic, dominating conquerors. And so really part of, I think, your work and part of my work is to tell better stories about the collaborative effort to take care of people, and how that doesn't just do good, warm, fuzzy things. It actually does. It has meaningful, tangible results for the economy, for the wellness of people and the planet. Those types of stories, I think we just need more and more and more stories of that.
Yep. Yeah, we have too many Supermans.
Yeah.
Stories. And kids. I mean, that's what we teach kids. Is not my dad. My dad was a very gentle guy, but my uncle, his brother. I remember this one time, his son came crying. I don't know what it was, and he listened to the whole thing, and the only thing out of his mouth was, "Did you hit him harder?"
Mm-hmm.
And so now he was not only hurt but embarrassed. Now I didn't understand that at the time, because I'm pretty aggressive myself. But yeah, what is it that is bothering you? And that goes a longer way than calling people names and stuff like that. I agree. I quite agree with that.
Yeah.
So next week, our guest is Peter Spender. I think I'm mispronouncing something, but correct me. So Peter Spender is his name, and he's the initiator of the Drop-In Academy. I don't know what that is. I have no idea, but we'll find out. I'm sure he'll tell us. And thank you very much. I'd like to stay in contact with you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Matt. It's been a great conversation.
Okay. All right. Bye.